Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tackling a major federal court decision that is literally sending shockwaves from the Supreme Court straight into local neighborhoods. We're unpacking the recent ruling on temporary protected status, or TPS, for Haitian immigrants. We're going to look at exactly what the courts decided and, honestly, more importantly, how a high-level federal policy shift instantly translates into on-the-ground realities. So let's dive right in. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the Haitian TPS ruling itself. Then we'll look at the hyper-local impact on Little Haiti, followed by the strain on local healthcare. And finally, we'll break down the competing political perspectives. All right, part one, the Haitian TPS ruling, the Supreme Court and the end of protection. So this legal battle has been unfolding for months, eventually making its way all the way to the Supreme Court, where a federal judge cleared the way for the administration to end temporary deportation protection for Haitians. But honestly, it all boils down to one staggering number: 350,000. That is how many Haitian immigrants nationwide are directly impacted by this end to temporary protected status. You know, policy changes can sometimes feel a bit abstract, right? But this number, it firmly grounds us. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of lives, careers, and families whose legal standing in the United States just fundamentally shifted overnight. And these folks are now caught in a pretty profound paradox. On one hand, they face the immediate loss of protected status here in the U.S., which means transitioning to undocumented status and facing potential deportation. But at the exact same time, the U.S. State Department is actively issuing severe advisories warning American citizens not to visit Haiti because of extreme government instability and rampant gang violence. So you've got this incredible tension. Legal protections in the U.S. are ending, while the U.S. government's own assessment of the home country paints a picture of extreme, undeniable danger. Moving on to part two, impact on Little Haiti, the hyperlocal economic fallout. Let's zoom in a bit to Nostrand Avenue. It's this incredibly vibrant commercial corridor in Brooklyn's Little Haiti. Well, according to local business managers, it has grown noticeably quieter lately. And this isn't just about the letter of the law. It's about the chilling effect of fear. When folks are terrified about what losing their status means, they just stay home. They aren't going out to shop, they aren't grabbing a bite to eat, and community life naturally retracts. That psychological anxiety, it becomes immediately, tangibly economic. To put that economic anxiety into perspective, let's look at one specific Haitian restaurant right there in Brooklyn. They originally had a total staff of 13 people. Following this ruling and all the subsequent disruptions, they were forced to lay off 8 of those employees. Just think about that for a second. That is way more than half of their entire workforce gone. It's a really stark example of how a Supreme Court decision instantly trickles down to a local business owner, forcing them to let go of the very people cooking the food and waiting the tables. With the streets going quiet and job losses mounting in the community, local leaders are desperately trying to provide some stability. Brooklyn Councilmember Alexa Aviles stepped up to reassure her constituents, saying, "Let me be unequivocal. Haitians will always be welcomed here in this city." It's a clear, direct message of local support, really meant to counter those massive shockwaves coming from the federal mandate. Which brings us to part three, strain on local healthcare, public service disruptions. So the economic hit to local businesses is really just one ripple. Labor advocates are raising massive red flags about the broader workforce, specifically in essential services. Nancy Higgins, the president of the New York State Nurses Association, hit the nail on the head. She said, "As a nurse, I know our hospitals are facing a staffing shortage. We are still recovering from the devastating impact from COVID-19. She's deeply concerned about hundreds of thousands of Haitian immigrants losing protected status because of what it means for our already stretched healthcare system. The union's warning is clear. Hospitals that are still struggling to maintain adequate staffing post-pandemic could face severe, compounding strain if these critical workers suddenly lose their authorization to work." All right, let's zoom back out for part four, competing political perspectives, the national debate. Now that we've grounded this in the local reality, we've got to look at the competing political arguments driving the national debate. The Department of Homeland Security firmly defended the administration's position, and their core argument really rests on the very name of the policy itself. They stated, temporary protected status is exactly that, temporary. They argue that over the years, the program has drifted from its original purpose, basically functioning as a de facto amnesty program. Their stance is strictly based on original congressional intent, emphasizing that this status was never legally designed to be a permanent solution. And as a quick bit of context here, while the name literally says temporary, some TPS designations for other countries have actually been renewed repeatedly, lasting for well over 2 decades, which really helps explain why this sudden removal feels so incredibly abrupt to many. But right on the flip side of that strict statutory argument is a powerful moral and humanitarian condemnation. New York Attorney General Letitia James reacted to the ruling with a sharp, incredibly brief rebuke. She simply said, "This is not justice, this is cruelty." It is a stark contrast, isn't it? Where the DHS is hyper-focused on the literal definition of the word temporary, officials like James are focusing entirely on the profound human impact of stripping protections from vulnerable populations. And this debate absolutely extends into discussions of racial equity, too. New York City public advocate Jumani D. Williams argued that the policy disproportionately targets communities of color. His take was, "We told people from the beginning this was truly, honestly about the whitening of this country. This was clearly about Black and brown communities, Black and brown immigrants." So you really have this wide spectrum of perspectives here, a strict, literal interpretation of immigration law on one end, and forceful arguments centered on humanitarianism and racial justice on the other. Ultimately, no matter where you stand on the politics, this ruling triggers a very real cascade of consequences for individuals starting tomorrow. As speakers at recent community gatherings pointed out, the first immediate outcome is the loss of work authorization, meaning losing the legal right to earn a living in the U.S., which directly ties back to those restaurant and hospital shortages we just talked about. Second, and seamlessly tied to that, is transitioning back into an undocumented status. And finally, these folks are forced into facing some incredibly difficult, life-altering decisions about their future in the U.S. and their family's overall safety. Which brings us to a really crucial question that this explainer leaves us with. With the legal battles settled for now, what exactly does the future hold for these 350,000 individuals as they lose work authorization and face undocumented status? How are our local economies, our hospitals, and our communities going to adapt to such a massive shift? It is a deeply complex issue with profound human consequences, and it's for sure a situation that will continue to evolve. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.